another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to the Dark Crystal Minute.
And begin all the same, sometimes good, sometimes bad.
And now once more the world must undergo a time of testing.
It is time to return to the castle.
There is much to be learned, and you have no time.
And here's your hosts, Philip Mitchell and JM Prater. Hello and welcome to the Dark Crystal Minute. This is your minute-by-minute discussion on the Dark Crystal. I'm your host, Philip Mitchell, and I'm from Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast, and The Gathering Songs.
And I'm your host, JM Prater, and I'm from Shoulder of Orion, the Blade Runner podcast, and Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast.
And on this episode, we're going to continue, as we always do, discussing, as the show is all about, in each episode, we discuss what happens within the minute of the film with Jim Henson and Frank Oz's, cult classic film, The Dark Crystal. And we are up to minute 19. So for those of you that want to follow along, we are watching between minutes 18 to 19 of The Dark Crystal. And so to recap pretty much what happens in this minute, obviously from last time we just saw that the Chamberlain has lost the trial by stone. Everyone's sort of, all celebrating and whatnot. And yeah, so, the Chamberlain, he's just freaking out. And the ritual master sort of says, that because he lost the trial by stone, he's like, now by the law, he must pay. And it's so weird because it's like, when watching this, you don't know what's going to happen to him. And it's not till, later, like a couple of seconds later, when you see the Skeksis all sort of ganging up on him, sort of in a way, just ripping his clothes off. And that the Gartha master, once, his clothes gets all ripped off, which is, one of the sort of the many disturbing scenes from the Dark Crystal. But when that happens, then the SkekSil, the Gartha master, yells out, now let him go, the Chamberlain is banished. So he's no longer, part of the Skeksis, hierarchy, I guess, from the castle of the crystal, from that aspect. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, it is probably, one of the many sort of, disturbing scenes from the Dark Crystal. It was just so weird, to sort of see, like, almost like, a naked sort of creature, like, on film. It was just, so weird. I don't know, what are your thoughts on this particular minute, Jamie?
I would agree with you. It's very disturbing. It's a very disturbing scene, but it also really not mirrors, but it's also almost a direct response to what we've seen from the mystics. And the mystics are these humble, gentle, kind creatures. But you see the Skeksis and the way they interact with each other, they're kind of vengeful, they're spiteful, they barely tolerate each other. They don't seem to like each other very much. And even underneath all of those tattered garbs are these kind of spindly, gross looking, I mean, through and through, they're just gross, and there's no sense of like brotherhood or sisterhood, whatever they are. There's no sense of, sense of bonding or unity to them. It's kind of like every man for themselves. You lost, you pay. You lost, you challenged me, you got to go. Whereas with the mystics, they don't even, maybe there was a master of the mystics or the wisest of the mystics, but there was never like an emperor. They didn't feel the need to have an emperor. They don't, they're kind of creatures of peace. They don't need that kind of thing to survive. So I just, thinking about that and then going to this scene, we really see, at least in my perspective, we see the Skeksis really on display as to who they are and what they are about. They are about power and kind of making a name for themselves and who's in charge. And they're just kind of jerks, for lack of better terms. They're just jerks. They're just nasty, foul creatures. And then they banish one of their own because he lost a wager, essentially. And being an emperor, it's funny because even the Gartham Master is now the Emperor. But really, what does that even mean? Nothing, really. I mean, what does he do? Like, okay, he's the Emperor. Like,
Yeah, and I know it's like, yeah, okay, so he gets to sort of rule all the Skeksis. He's also a Gartham Master, so I mean, he didn't like give those Gartham Master powers to someone else. So it's just like, it's just an extra added role essentially. But I think the big part is really just, I mean, as they're sort of hoping that with the next great conjunction comes, that things will fall in their place, and that they'll all live forever from that perspective. But yeah, and even like with the Skeksis, like they're actually very political, like having these challenges like a trial by stone, compared to the Mystics, which they're not like that at all. They're always about the peace, and sort of they're always speaking riddles, and they take things slowly, I guess, with their decision making. Is this the right move, or is this or not, that sort of thing. Yeah, and just towards the end, as we see, the Chamberlain sort of naked body like on the wall towards the end of that minute, and again, you could sort of have a sense that you just had puppeteers that are just sort of behind the wall puppeteering the Chamberlain from that shot, but it's still such a realistically looking creature.
Yeah. That's the first full reveal that we see of the Skeksis, really. I mean, from head to toe. We see that they're kind of like these leathery, reptilian, bird-like, not sure, almost dinosaur-like, gross things. And it's full-bodied, and it's a great puppet. And again, it points back to the magic of what they were doing. Not only did they imagine how many versions of Chamberlain they had to make for the close-ups, for the wide shots, for people who are under the floor or people who are under the puppet, and then they have to build another full body puppet that looks just like the one in the costume, but completely naked up against the wall. Again, and it was a really quick shot too. It's a very, very quick shot, and then they cut to the actual full puppet of it as it's kind of grabbing its clothes and walking away all slinky. It's just really amazing, and I don't even think people realize that these characters that we're seeing in this film specifically, sometimes for one character there's 6 or 7 different variants depending on how they're shooting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually noticed, like, even like one of the characters of the Skeksis, I think it's sort of a wide shot, and you see like one of the Skeksis because he has his left hand that's sort of pretty much like a claw. I like even like subtlety of him just moving the claw up and down. I mean, as he would probably be about to rip off the cloves of the Chamberlain. It's just crazy, and just like you could just see Chamberlain's expressions and just his screams and wailing, as he's sort of getting his sort of clothes like completely ripped off. Yeah, it's Yeah, very unusual, but I mean, it is a Dark Crystal, so dark aspects within the film.
Straight out of Thra.
Yeah. Straight out of Thra, indeed.
That's right, man. It's like they're a gang. It's like the Skeksis are a gang, and it's like, this is what we do, yo.
Yeah.
You tried to get, you tried to be the leader, and it ain't gonna work, so you got to go. Know. They're really like thugs. Really, the Skeksis are thugs.
Yeah, and I mean, it sort of opens up all these possibilities, like with stories with the Skeksis, if they decide to do this with an Age of Resistance, whether you'd have Skeksis sort of done these sort of trials before, which I know actually, thinking about it, they did do it in there was this manga series called Legends of the Dark Crystal, and I think chapter 2 was, I think it was like the 2 Skeksis. I think it was the Chamberlain, and there was another character, I've forgotten who it was, but they had sort of like a trial by fire kind of challenge. So I'm really curious. I hope that Netflix, if they sort of, come up with sort of like a new sort of trial by something challenge, just to show, just the Skeksis that they're just willing to do anything to try and, have to gain power and whatnot. So, which is really cool. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting in light of our discussion of Age of Resistance. Obviously, we know it takes place before the events of the events in the Dark Crystal, and if we're going to see the original Emperor come to power and what that was like, so it makes sense that we would see another trial by stone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see whether someone actually tried to take over the Emperor and with a new trial by, I don't know, whatever it could be. So yeah, I certainly hope to see something new in that respect. And I think that'll probably wrap up for this this episode of the Dark Crystal Minute. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Dark Crystal Minute. If you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/darkcrystalpodcast. You can check us out on Twitter at darkcrystalpod. We're also on Instagram at darkcrystalpodcast. And if you can give us a review on Facebook or on iTunes, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your time, and come back next time for more The Dark Crystal Minute.